Well, Maggie, while this is being politicized, there is something in the argument that someone like CNN could afford the premium, and someone smaller like West
The
Seattle
Investigative
blog,
Reporting Workshop.
the Investigative Reporting Workshop can't. And let's just say, let's take it to another place where.
But again, look at the quality that we have today. Right now, this is all best effort today, right? And it kind of sucks. Like, wouldn't you rather have like the quality of the video and the experience be better? And you can't get, they don't have any kind of quality of service on the network. So if some service providers want to pay for that, then I think, and there's an appetite for that with consumers, then I think that is a service that will thrive, right?
A premium internet, sure. Kat, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's just, then it's sort of amplifying the voices that are already strong potentially and minimizing the voices that don't have, don't have the money to pay for the sort of amplification, which,
yeah,
is
I guess I just really, I think
but
that there's a fundamental, misunderstanding of how this works. I mean, just because certain kinds of traffic are going to get better quality of service doesn't mean that it cuts off the voices of everyone else, right? It makes a service that people pay for that is a better quality service, right? So if you want to have everybody have crappy service, then we probably won't use the internet as much as we possibly could, is what I'm thinking. And then you don't have some really cool stuff that entrepreneurs can do. And there's nothing to say that the independent producers have to pay for this all themselves. I mean, you have consumers, and we live in a free market. If people have an appetite for better quality video and audio and services, people will pay for it.
Well, can you talk about, though, aren't there cities that are offering better internet access, broadband access than cable providers and broadband providers, and there's a tension there, meaning that higher quality of access is available, and cities want to offer it, but there are companies that are trying to block that. And doesn't that show a signal of potential not so free
market? No, that's a totally
market?
Different issue. No, that's a different issue entirely. That issue is all about building infrastructure. So you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not somebody who's saying that the cable companies and the phone companies don't have their own business interests, and when it comes to competition, they'd probably rather have less of it. But in the instance that you're talking about, yes, for years, cable companies and phone companies have worked very hard and lobbied against governments coming in and building their own infrastructure, because you're right, they fear somebody else coming in and owning infrastructure that would compete with them, and there are a whole host of issues that play into that. That's very different from the thing that we're talking about now, which is the cable companies and the phone companies have actually made this investment in the infrastructure. They own the infrastructure. It's essentially, they've built the roads to the towns. They own those roads. And they provide you a service to transport whatever cargo you want on those roads. And what we're talking about is, if Verizon also has its own cargo company, should they be allowed to let their trucks go ahead of an independent producer's trucks? And I think we have pretty much said no, that that's what these net neutrality regulations say, that they cannot do that. They can't discriminate against someone else's traffic to favor their own. But I think that if you want to set up a piece of the highway that gives anybody express access so that they don't get hung up in traffic, and that the experience and that the stuff that's delivered to the customer gets there better and faster, I'm not quite sure why that necessarily is a bad thing.
Is it just us?
We still have a free and open internet. I think it might be. See what I'm saying? We need better quality of service on the network.
I mean, yeah, I to me, I think there's sort of the issues, right, about just because they built the infrastructure doesn't mean it shouldn't be regulated. I don't think you're saying that it should be totally unregulated, but there is sort of well, I have sort of several potential responses. One of which is that they are, licensed public spectrum, and they're sort of like the public interest aspect there, particularly in the mobile arena.
But not all of it is spectrum.
No,
right?
agree.
Yeah, in the mobile arena. Yeah.
Yeah, in the mobile arena, I think the difference in regulation proposed for net neutrality or open internet regulation between mobile and wireline is something that I think is a potential source of concern, as a producer and consumer of news information, partly because of the different demographics of who's using the mobile web and who's using the wireline web. So if you have different regulation for mobile and wireline, then what does that mean about sort of who is and isn't able to contribute as a consumer producer?
Yeah, and I would have to say, yeah, Kat, I totally agree with you on that. In fact, I don't think that there should be separate rules for mobile and wireline broadband. But in saying that, I think that you do have to recognize, though, that spectrum is a limited resource, and even though it is a public, spectrum is essentially owned by the people, it's licensed in 100-year intervals to for a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars to people. So I mean, there's an investment there that you have to recognize. But I think at the same time, we're already seeing it with wireless companies. Not allow certain types of apps on their network, and they're saying they're doing it because they're trying to protect their networks, but at the same time, they're allowing other things that do something similar. For example, Slingbox, which basically allows people to watch their cable television over an internet connection, was being blocked on the iPhone, or not blocked, but it wasn't allowed in the App Store. And there was a lot of back and forth between Sling and Apple and Sling and AT&T, and basically it came down to AT&T saying it violated their terms of use because they don't allow live streaming of network television. But at the same time, they're streaming live video of, or they were allowing Major League Baseball to stream live baseball games. So it was kind of like, well, what's the difference? If you can, I think that's why I don't think the rules should be different, but I think that in formulating the rules, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the networks have different requirements, and if applications and independent content developers can develop applications and content that doesn't hurt or degrade the network, then they shouldn't be kept off those networks.
But the rules. Sorry.
Go ahead, JG.
From the Sling example, one interesting point is that the rules as written right now don't prevent an independent app store like the Apple one from discriminating at all. Apple can use whatever criteria it wants to use, and that is something the FCC has no apparent appetite to change. So you have an interesting situation where you have lots of different potential gatekeepers, particularly in a smartphone environment where people are going to be depending on apps. And is an interesting, one of the questions raised by the dissenters really is, well, if you can have levels of discrimination in different places, why do you suddenly say only these people can't discriminate?
Let me interject for one moment. Hold on for 1 second. Let me remind the attendees that encourage you guys to submit questions and participate, and we will include them. Go ahead, Maggie. You want to say something?
Well, the other thing that's kind of concerning about wireless being treated differently is the fact that we've got networks that are getting faster and faster. So we're already on to what we are calling the 4th generation of wireless networks, and we're actually going to see even faster networks coming online, in probably the next decade. And then we'll see less of a constraint in terms of what would harm the network if it's on the network. And so I think that it's a mistake for the FCC to regulate these two different ways of accessing the internet in different ways. Because I think, someone once said to me, the FCC is always like about 10 years behind everybody else in regulating something. And that again is sort of the trouble with regulation. You can't think of every instance that could come up, and the unintended consequences of certain regulation or regulating in a certain way can have repercussions, 10, 20 years from now, and we'll all be back here arguing about that. But I bet the video will be better.
Well, let me ask a fundamental question, because this is one that is when you hear net neutrality, and from the prism of a journalist, does net neutrality threaten free information to an informed citizenry? Maggie, Kat, and then JG. Just what's your quick one-word answer, perhaps? Does it threaten that at all, Maggie?
I would say no.
Kat?
I would say that because we don't know where it's going to go, the potential for it to do so exists, and it's something we should be careful about.
I'll give a lawyer answer and say it's hard to say.
Then that's why this debate continues, right? And it is a complex issue.
But to me, one of the big issues is that if news organizations were investing money in creative mobile applications, we're investing in interactive tools, we're investing in, crowdsourcing technologies and all these other things. I mean, the foundations that support nonprofit journalism are investing a lot of money in app development and all sorts of other cool, fun, amazing things that are allowing us to engage with our audiences in a way that, is just different than we've ever been able to do before. If that's predicated on the internet as it is structured now, as we experience it now, both in wireline and mobile, and we're not sure that that's going to continue into the future, what does that mean for all these innovations that people are building and experimenting with? A question to which I don't know the answer, but again, I think it's because we don't know, we should factor it into the innovation.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting thing that, the internet is, as we know it, in a general way, is less than 25 years old.
For sure.
And print journalism goes back hundreds of years, and there's been a long time to develop all the notions of what print journalism was. There's even been a lot more time to think about broadcast journalism, but online journalism is really in its infancy.
And with it changing so rapidly, should there be more active participation, regardless of what side of the debate, but should there be active participation from our industry where there is the mode of FOIA, participating and trying to get involved in that debate? This is a young debate, and perhaps it's paranoia and it's not actually happening just yet, but do you wait for that to happen before journalist raises their hand, before a trade organization says one thing or another?
I mean, to me, one of the issues is, I think as Maggie was saying, a lot of people just don't understand the physical infrastructure of the internet, and because they don't understand that, it makes it difficult to engage in some of the discussions around regulations and its potential implications. So part of it, I think, is just about trying to help people understand how the internet works and how regulation could impact it. But, I think most journalists tend toward paranoia anyway, so.
But I think it's not even just a matter of understanding how the internet works from a technical standpoint, but also understanding the economics of how the internet works. The thing that I've been sort of adamant about in this whole discussion is that the companies that own the infrastructure that are delivering you your broadband service today, they have a business model. I mean, the more content that's on the internet and the more people need the internet and need faster speeds, the better it is for their business. So there's not really that much of an incentive for them to degrade that traffic or to make it more difficult for journalists to do their jobs or for people to get access to information. I mean, the whole point of investing the billions of dollars they've invested in these networks is to get information to people and to get content and entertainment to people. So that's why I think to a certain degree some of this is a little is overblown and a little bit misunderstood.
I mean, not to be overly cynical, but I think the point of the billions they've invested is to make money for their corporations.
Yeah, but how do they make money?
Which they do by providing
people don't buy the service.
Right, I'm just saying their goal ultimately is not to provide information, qua information.